Yo, what's going on, guys? Today we'll be ranking every single evolution in Clash Royale from worst to best. I feel like the meta has been changing quite a bit recently, so stuff is quite different now than it was just a month or two back, but one thing that hasn't changed is that the Evolved Ice Spirit is still the very worst evolution, by far. I feel like the Evo Ice Spirit just has no point the majority of the time. Like, most of the time when I play an Evo Ice Spirit, the extra frost waves just get completely wasted. They just freeze the ground when nothing's there, because when you play your Ice Spirit, most of the time you don't even need any extra frost waves. Just the single Ice Spirit by itself, without the evolution, gets the job done. The vast majority of the time. So that's our only D tier evolution. I feel like most of the evolutions are actually pretty balanced right now, so we're going to move straight up to the C tier with the Evolved Barbarians. They're a solid evolution. I don't think they need a buff or anything like that. It's just the fact that they used to be good in Lava Hound, but now Lava Hound seems to prefer other evolutions than Evo Barbs, so now they really just have no place, and it's pretty much just some random off-meta or mid-ladder decks that might use it. But that's a fine place for the Evo Barbs to be, in my opinion. I know this might surprise a lot of people, but we do have the Evo Wall Breakers in the C tier. They used to be one of the best evolutions in the game, but I feel like ever since Duchess came out, they just fell off so badly, and they got quite a few nerfs as well. Even now that Princess Tower is back in the meta, Wall Breakers are finally viable again, but I feel like even in the Wall Breakers decks, people never use the Evo Wall Breakers. Like, if it's Mega Knight Miner Wall Breakers, people would just rather use the Evo Zap or Evo Bats, really any other evolution than the Wall Breakers themselves, which is kind of sad. Right above the Wall Breakers, we have the Evolved Recruits. They're a pretty solid evolution. I feel like they definitely add something to the Recruits, but the Recruits themselves seem to be so bad right now, just thanks to the fact that Wizard is meta, Goblin Demolisher is meta. There's so much splash that can easily counter Recruits decks, so they're not really the best ever, but they're not half bad either. Right above the Recruits, we have the Archers. Evo Archers are pretty solid right now. I mean, they're not the best, but they can definitely work sometimes. The main thing that's really keeping them so far down is the fact that they made that change to Evolved Firecracker and Evolved Archers to where they now die to arrows even when they're evolved, so it really makes them just not feel as special as they used to be, and pretty much 40% of top ladder players are currently running arrows, and I'm sure all over mid ladder there's arrows as well, so yeah, I feel like Evo Archers, I can't really justify putting them much higher than that. We have the Evolved Battle Ram. I remember this card also used to seem really scary, and it still is very scary. Sometimes it can really change the tide of a game if your opponent is not prepared for it, but I feel like there's so many resets right now, like the Evo Tesla having the Spawn Wave and the Death Wave. It can so easily reset the Battle Ram evolution and just completely destroy it without it even doing any more than a normal Battle Ram would, and also there's stuff like Ice Spirit, Log, all kinds of things like that that make the Evo Battle Ram really just not as useful as it could be. Actually, you know what, guys? Now that I think about it, I have seen a couple Recruits decks start to pop up on ladders, so I'll actually move the Recruits up right here to the top of the C tier out of these 5 cards. Alright, so right above this, I guess I'll put the Evolved Firecracker. I think Evolved Firecracker is a pretty decent evolution. Hog Rider's not bad right now, Hog EQ is not bad, but I don't think the Evolved Firecracker really has anything to do with the strength of Hog EQ, because Firecracker, ever since it started dying to arrows, it has the same problem as Archers, and yeah, just does not feel as special, but it can definitely do a lot of damage sometimes, so it's not completely useless. Definitely a little bit better than Evolved Archers are. And so right above the Evolved Firecracker, we have the Evolved RG. RG is a solid win condition, but I think the evolution really doesn't add too much at all to it. Sometimes the knockback can be pretty useful, but I think people have kind of figured out how to play against it. Like, either they have to play their ground card really early before the RG starts shooting and knocking it back, or they just have to play a ranged card, and people know that, so yeah, the Evolved RG doesn't really do too much more than a normal RG for the most part. Above the RG, we have the Evolution Mortar. I feel like the Evo Mortar is definitely pretty solid. Mortar itself is somewhat bad right now, not really meta at all, so we don't see Evo Mortar almost at all, but I think it's a decent evolution. It just shoots so fast that it can lock on the tower so quickly and completely change the tide of a game. Kind of the same way how an Evo Battle Ram can also completely shift the tide of a game. And next up, we do have one of our newer evolutions, the Evolved Goblin Giant. I think near the top of C tier is fine for it. It's honestly a decent evolution. The thing is, though, it only starts working once the Evolved Goblin Giant is below half HP, and by that point, I feel like the Goblin Giant doesn't have much of a lifespan unless your opponent is completely out of elixir. I do feel like a decent amount of people use the Evolved Goblin Giant, but that's mainly because the Goblin Giant decks don't really have any other better evolution to use, but I don't think the Evo Goblin Giant itself is too broken, but it's definitely not bad. I feel like it's very balanced. We do have quite a few C tier evolutions here, actually, but I feel like C tier is maybe right around average or right below average. And finally, for our last C tier evolution, we have the Evolved Valkyrie. Maybe could even put this in the B tier. Not really sure, actually. But I feel like the top of C tier is fine. It's pretty good in Lava Hound, and not really too much else. I think most other decks prefer to have other evolutions, like Evo Knight, for example. But yeah, Valkyrie does the job pretty well in stuff like Lava Hound. Definitely not a bad evolution at all. And guys, I know this might seem very surprising, but I'm actually going to put the Evolved Goblin Barrel in the B tier. The main reason why is because the Dagger Duchess got a huge nerf, and now pretty much everyone plays Princess Tower, and it just made Logbait decks so much better right now. Like these Prince Logbait Rascals decks, they can actually get so much value out of the Evo Goblin Barrel. And the best part about it is that you can't really tell which barrel is going to be the fake one and which one will be the real one, so you can really play a lot of mind games with your opponents and completely spam the death out of them. Or completely spam the life out of them, I should say. Yeah, it's a really solid evolution. I find it to be really broken sometimes, if you don't have the right counters to it. And so, at the top of the B tier, I'm going to put the Evolved Skeletons. I feel like they fell off quite a bit. They don't really seem to chain nearly as often as they used to ever since that one nerf they got, maybe a couple months ago or so, but they're definitely not bad. They can still chain quite a bit against heavier decks, but against Psycho decks, I feel like a lot of the Psycho cards kill them before they start chaining. And a lot of Psycho decks have also started to opt out of using Evo Skeletons ever since Giant fell off, because I feel like they were mainly good to counter Giant, but Giant stopped really being as popular, so you don't have as much of a need now to play them. Alright, moving on to the A tier, we only have a handful of evolutions left. We have the Evolved Zap. I feel like it's very solid. It's very good in stuff like Giant Graveyard, Lava Hound. I'm sure there's a lot of other decks too, just a ton of random decks. I feel like, yeah, there's just a lot of random things that can get a lot of value out of Evo Zap. It's a very solid evolution, even after the nerf. I feel like an appropriate nerf to the Evo Zap could be to where they make it 2 full zaps of damage. So basically it'll be the same like it is now, except instead of being 3 waves, it'll be 2 waves. It'll still do the same amount of damage, but it'll have just 0.5 seconds less stun overall. So I think that could be a good change to the Evo Zap if they do ever want to nerf the card. Alright, this one will be pretty tough to say, but I'm going to put the Evolved Goblin Drill in the A tier right above Evo Zap. I'm not really sure how I feel about it. I know it's not going to be as strong as the gameplay we saw in it because it will be toned down a bit by the time it goes in the game. And also the one weakness of it is the fact that whenever you place a normal drill, or even the Evo drill, they can see exactly where it goes because the evolution icon pops up where you place it. So I don't think it'll be too broken like we originally thought, especially because they're going to tone it down. But yeah, it should still be a pretty solid evolution. Goblin Drill's already a really good card, so with the Evo, it definitely could be even stronger. We're just going to have to wait and see how this one plays out. Above that, we have the Evo Bomber. It got definitely a couple nerfs, but it still seems to be pretty solid. It's not like crazy broken as before, but sometimes I still get completely wrecked by a random Evo Bomber. I feel like ever since they made it take 2 cycles, you just never really predict it. Now you never really can tell when your opponent has it in cycle, unless you're really on top of keeping track of it. Right above the Evo Bomber, we have the Evo Wizard. Honestly, the Evo Wizard maybe could even go a little bit higher, because I feel like it's such a broken card right now. I don't know, it just gets so much value all the time, and the shield is crazy. It just has like a crazy knockback, and yeah, just having a shield on a card like Wizard is really broken inherently. I feel like even if the shield was 1 HP, it could still be a pretty solid evolution, but I think the main thing that needs to get nerfed is either the shield HP again, or they need to nerf the knockback of the shield breaking. Next up, we have the Evo Bats, but now that I think about it, I'll actually put the Evo Bats probably below a few of these cards here. Yeah, I'll put Evo Bats right here in the A tier. I know I'm not ranking everything exactly in order, but I'm trying to do it roughly. Yeah, Evo Bats, they're very solid. I don't know how they got so good. I feel like they were kind of bad for a long time, but then after a few buffs, they randomly started to become played quite a bit. They're super good in Mega Knight, any kind of minor deck, sometimes like some random mortar decks. I'm sure there's a lot of other things too that I'm not really thinking of at this current moment. Yeah, that seems pretty solid for it. And finally, at the very top of the A tier, we have the Evolved Knight. This could even be an S tier card. I'm not quite sure. I feel like I haven't seen it as much on ladder recently, so that's why I'm not putting it in the S tier, but it very well could be the S tier. It just kind of based on your personal opinion, I guess. Yeah, I think A tier is pretty solid. It's still a really broken Evo. You could put it S tier. It could use a small nerf, but doesn't need like a huge nerf. And finally, for our very last evolution, we have the Evolved Tesla. They nerfed it, and they even nerfed the normal Tesla, but man, the Evo Tesla is still so broken. I think they really messed up by giving it a Death Shockwave. I feel like if they just took away the Death Shockwave, it would be completely balanced, and it would just be like a maybe B tier evolution if they did that. So I think the main issue with it is just the Death Shockwave. They just have to take that away. And that will be it. So thank you guys all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!